sophomore named Danny who helped with the technical stuff. Danny had a crush on Brittany, which made him easy to manipulate. "Hey, Danny." Ashley caught him after school one day with Brittany standing close by, smiling sweetly. "We want to do something special for Rebecca's performance." "Like a surprise?" Danny looked confused. "What kind of surprise?" "Well, we were thinking we could set up some special lighting. Maybe have some sound effects ready. To make it more dramatic." Ashley's voice was honey-sweet. "She's our friend and we really want her to have an amazing moment." The lie came so easily it was almost beautiful in its cruelty. Danny, eager to impress Brittany, nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, I can do that." "What did you have in mind?" Ashley handed him a USB drive. "Just some audio files. Applause tracks, that kind of thing. Load them into the system and I'll text you when to play them." What Danny didn't know was that those audio files weren't just applause. They were recordings of laughter, of people booing, of sounds designed to humiliate. Ashley had spent hours editing them together, mixing real applause with jeering, creating something that would sound supportive at first, but would quickly reveal its true nature. The posters went up on a Monday morning. They were everywhere. In the hallways, in the bathrooms, taped to lockers. Rebecca's face stared out from dozens of walls. The words around her meant to mock but carefully designed to look like genuine support if a teacher glanced at them. Students stopped to take pictures. The hashtag Ashley had created started trending within the school. Everyone was talking about it. The talent show was still 2 weeks away, but it already felt like the main event of the year. Rebecca saw the posters. How could she not? Her own face followed her everywhere she went. She stood in front of one during lunch, staring at the badly photoshopped image of herself. Someone had put her head on Mozart's body. Another poster showed her as Beethoven. The words "Watch her make history" were written in glittering letters across the top. A group of freshmen walked by, giggling. One of them pointed at the poster, then at Rebecca, then whispered something to her friend. They both laughed harder. Rebecca's jaw tightened. She pulled the poster down slowly, carefully, folding it into smaller and smaller squares until it fit in her pocket. Then she walked away without a word, her head high even though her hands were shaking. In the library, her sanctuary, she finally let herself feel the weight of it all. Mrs. Patterson, the librarian, noticed her sitting in the corner with her eyes closed, breathing slowly like she was trying to calm a storm inside. "Rebecca?" Mrs. Patterson's voice was gentle. "Are you okay, honey?" Rebecca opened her eyes. For a moment, she looked like she might say something, might explain everything, might ask for help. But then that wall came back up, the one she'd built so carefully over the years. "I'm fine," she said quietly. "Just tired." Mrs. Patterson didn't believe her, but she also understood that sometimes people need to fight their own battles. "If you need anything," she said, "I'm here." Rebecca nodded, but she didn't say anything else. That week, Ashley's campaign intensified. She created a group chat called Piano Performance Watch Party and added nearly 100 students. The messages came constantly. Predictions about what would happen. Bets on whether Rebecca would even show up. Plans for who would sit where to get the best video angles. Tyler started a countdown on his Instagram story. 10 days until the show. 9 days, 8 days. Each post got hundreds of likes. Comments poured in, most of them cruel, some of them trying to be funny, all of them treating Rebecca's performance like it was a comedy show instead of a talent competition. "Do you think we're going too far?" Brittany asked one afternoon, a tiny seed of doubt creeping into her voice. Ashley looked at her sharply. "Too far?" She signed up for this. She put herself out there. "We're just having fun." "Yeah, but some of those comments are really mean." "Then don't read them," Ashley said, her voice harder now. "Look, Rebecca's been invisible for 3 years. Now everyone knows her name. We're making her famous. She should be thanking us." Kevin nodded in agreement. "Besides, if she can actually play, then all this hype is good for her, right? And if she can't, well, that's not our fault." The logic was twisted, but it worked. Brittany pushed down her doubts and went back to planning with the others. What none of them understood was what was happening in Rebecca's world outside of school. Every day after the final bell rang, she went home to that small apartment. Her father worked the evening shift at the factory, so she was alone with the piano and her thoughts. The old upright piano had yellowed keys and a couple of strings that didn't sound quite right anymore. But to Rebecca, it was perfect. She sat on the worn bench, the same one her mother had sat on, the same one her grandmother had brought from across the ocean all those years ago. Rebecca's practice routine was intense. She'd chosen her piece carefully, something that would show not just technical skill but emotion, something that would speak when her voice couldn't. She practiced scales until her fingers moved like water. She worked on difficult passages one measure at a time, repeating them 50, 60, 100 times until they were perfect. Her father came home late each night to find her still playing. He was a quiet man, worn down by years of hard work and loss, but he understood music's power. He'd met Rebecca's mother at one of her performances. He'd fallen in love with her while listening to her play Chopin. "Your mother would be proud," he said one night, standing in the doorway. Rebecca's hands paused on the keys. "What if I mess up?" "Then you mess up," he said simply. "But I don't think you will. You have her gift, Rebecca. More than that, you have her strength." He didn't know about Ashley's plan, didn't know about the posters or the memes or the cruelty being organized against his daughter. Rebecca had kept it all from him, not wanting to add to his worries. He worked hard enough already. This was her battle to fight, but his words gave her something she needed. Not confidence exactly, but determination. Her mother had faced audiences in grand concert halls. Her grandmother had survived a war and rebuilt her life in a foreign country, through nothing but her music and her will to keep going. Rebecca came from strong women, women who didn't break easily. As the talent show drew closer, the atmosphere at school reached a fever pitch. Ashley's countdown had everyone talking. Teachers noticed something was happening but couldn't quite put their finger on what. The excitement felt off somehow, less like anticipation and more like the tension before a storm. 3 days before the show, Ashley made her final preparations. She met with Danny again, confirming that all the audio files were loaded and ready. She organized her friends into their positions in the front row. She made sure Tyler had his camera fully charged and ready to live stream. "This is going to be incredible," she told her group. "Everyone's going to remember this. We're going to be legends." They all nodded, caught up in the excitement, not thinking about what they were really doing. Not thinking about the girl who went home every night and played piano until her fingers ached. Not thinking about consequences or karma or the possibility that they might be wrong. Meanwhile, Rebecca practiced. She played through her piece one more time, then again, then again. The notes filled the small apartment, spilling out through the thin walls into the hallway where neighbors paused to listen. The music was beautiful, haunting, powerful. Rebecca didn't know exactly what Ashley had planned, but she knew enough. She'd seen the look in Ashley's eyes, had heard the laughter in the hallways, had read between the lines of those fake support posters. She knew they expected her to fail, expected her to crumble under the pressure, expected the invisible girl to disappear completely under the weight of their mockery. But Rebecca had spent 3 years being invisible by choice. And she'd spent every one of those years building something they couldn't see. Something that was about to surprise everyone. The night before the talent show, she sat at her piano one last time. Her fingers moved across the keys, playing the piece she'd chosen. The piece that would change everything. And for the first time in weeks, Rebecca smiled. Tomorrow they would finally see her. Really see her. And nothing would ever be the same again. The day of the talent show arrived with the kind of energy that made the whole school feel electric. Students talked louder in the hallways, moved faster between classes, checked their phones constantly for updates. The auditorium had been transformed overnight with lights and decorations, turning the ordinary space into something that felt almost professional. Rebecca woke up that morning with her heart already racing. She lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling, trying to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. Her mother's black dress hung on the back of her door, carefully steamed the night before. It was simple and elegant, the kind of dress that never went out of style because it was timeless. Her father had already left for his morning shift, but he'd left a note on the kitchen table. Just 3 words in his careful handwriting. "Make them listen." Rebecca held that note for a long time, reading those words over and over until they settled into her bones like a promise. School that day was torture. Every class felt like it lasted forever. Rebecca could feel eyes on her constantly, hear the whispers that followed her down every hallway. The fake support posters were still up, and someone had added more overnight. Her face was everywhere, mocking her from every wall. Ashley and her friends were in full performance mode. They wore matching t-shirts that said Rebecca Chen Fan Club, in glittery letters that were so over the top they were obviously fake. They walked through the hallways like they were on a parade route, high-fiving people making a show of their support. "We're so excited for your performance," Ashley said loudly when she passed Rebecca in the hallway, her voice dripping with false enthusiasm. Her friends giggled behind her. Rebecca didn't respond. She just kept walking, her backpack heavy on her shoulders, counting down the hours until she could go home and prepare. Lunch was impossible. Rebecca sat in her usual corner of the library, but even there she couldn't escape it. Students kept walking by, sneaking glances, whispering. Some of them had their phones out, clearly texting about her. The librarian, Mrs. Patterson, seemed to sense something was wrong and kept checking on her, but Rebecca insisted she was fine. She wasn't fine. Her hands were shaking. Her stomach felt like it was full of stones. Part of her wanted to run, to pull her name from the list, to disappear back into the safety of invisibility. It would be so easy to just not show up, to let them win without even trying. But then she thought about her grandmother playing piano in bombed-out buildings during the war, refusing to let the music die. She thought about her mother performing even when she was sick, even when she could barely stand because the music mattered more than the pain. She thought about that note on the kitchen table. Make them listen. Rebecca closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She wasn't going to run. The final bell rang at 3 o'clock and the school exploded with excitement. Students flooded toward the auditorium, the energy almost manic. The talent show didn't start until 7, but people were already claiming seats, already setting up their phones for the perfect recording angle. Rebecca went home. She needed these few hours away from the noise, away from the stairs, away from everything. In her small apartment, she took a long shower and let the hot water wash away some of the tension. She dried her hair carefully and put on her mother's dress. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. Standing in front of the mirror, Rebecca barely recognized herself. She looked older somehow, more serious. The girl staring back at her wasn't the invisible student who hid in library corners. This girl looked like she had something to prove. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications. The hashtag Ashley had created was trending. Screenshots of the memes were being shared and reshared. Tyler's countdown had reached its final hours. The anticipation was building to something that felt almost dangerous. Rebecca turned her phone off and sat at her piano one last time. She didn't play her competition piece. Instead, she played something her mother used to play for her when she was little, a simple lullaby that always made her feel safe. The familiar note steadied her breathing, slowed her racing heart. At 6:30, her father came home early from work. He'd traded shifts with someone so he could be there. He wore his best shirt, the one he saved for important occasions, and his eyes were bright with pride and worry mixed together. "You ready?" he asked. Rebecca nodded, not trusting her voice. They drove to the school in silence. The parking lot was already packed, cars everywhere, groups of students walking toward the auditorium like they were heading to a concert. Rebecca could hear the noise from inside even before they entered the building. The auditorium was chaos. Every seat seemed to be taken, students packed in shoulder to shoulder, the noise level almost deafening. Phone screens glowed everywhere like fireflies. Ashley and her friends had claimed the entire front row just as they'd planned. They wore their ridiculous fan club shirts and held signs that said things like piano royalty, with drawings that were clearly meant to mock. Rebecca had to check in backstage. The moment she walked behind the curtain, away from the crowd, she felt like she could breathe again. Other performers were warming up, practicing dance moves, running through songs. The energy back here was different, nervous, but genuine. These were students who actually cared about their performances. A junior named Chris was running through his guitar routine. He looked up when Rebecca entered and gave her a small smile. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," Rebecca admitted. "Yeah, me too." He strummed a chord. "But that's good, right? Means we care." Rebecca found a quiet corner and sat down, trying to focus.
She could hear the audience through the curtain, the roar of voices, the occasional burst of laughter.
She knew Ashley was out there, knew half the school had come just to watch her fail, knew that somewhere in that crowd, someone had probably already written the mean comments they planned to post the second she made a mistake. The talent show coordinator, a teacher named Mr. Williams, gathered all the performers for a quick pep talk. "Remember," he said, This is about celebrating talent and courage. Everyone here has already won, just by having the guts to get on that stage. Be proud of yourselves. Some of the other students nodded enthusiastically. Rebecca just tried to keep breathing. The show started right at 7. The auditorium lights dimmed and the crowd erupted in cheers. The first act was a dance group, popular girls who moved in perfect sync to a pop song. They were good and the audience loved them. The applause was real and warm. Then came a comedy routine that got mixed reactions. A magic act that went mostly well except for one trick that didn't work. A singer who had a beautiful voice but forgot some of her lyrics halfway through. The audience was generous with their applause, supportive even when things went wrong. Rebecca was scheduled to perform 8th, right after intermission. She watched the first half of the show from the wings, her stomach getting tighter with each passing minute. She could see Ashley in the front row, her phone up recording everything, waiting. Intermission came. 15 minutes for people to stretch, go to the bathroom, check their phones. Rebecca stayed backstage, pacing in small circles. Her hands felt cold despite the warm auditorium. She flexed her fingers, running through the finger exercises her mother had taught her. "Rebecca Chen," Mr. Williams called. "You're up next." "You ready?" "No," she wanted to say. "No, I'm not ready. I'll never be ready for this," but instead she nodded. "Yes." The lights in the auditorium dimmed again, signaling the end of intermission. Students rushed back to their seats. The noise level rose even higher than before. Rebecca could hear them out there, could feel the weight of all those eyes even though they couldn't see her yet. Mr. Williams walked onto the stage to introduce her. The crowd quieted a little, but there was an edge to the silence, an anticipation that felt cruel. "Our next performer," Mr. Williams said into the microphone, "is junior Rebecca Chen, who will be playing piano for us." The applause that followed was loud but strange. Mixed with real clapping were exaggerated cheers, wolf whistles, someone yelling, "Piano Queen," in a mocking voice. Ashley and her friends in the front row were on their feet, cheering and waving their signs with theatrical enthusiasm that was obviously fake. Other students laughed at the display. Rebecca stood in the wings watching this performance of false support. She could see Tyler with his phone up, live streaming to hundreds of people online. Could see students nudging each other, grinning in anticipation. Could see Ashley's face, that smile of someone who thinks they've already won. Behind her, the piano waited on stage. A beautiful grand piano, so different from her old upright at home. The stage lights made it gleam like something precious. Mr. Williams gestured for her to come out. This was it. The moment where she either walked out there and faced them all or turned around and ran. Rebecca thought about her grandmother. Her mother. All the women in her family who had faced impossible things and survived. She thought about her father sitting somewhere in that audience in his best shirt. She thought about every hour she'd spent practicing, every sacrifice her family had made so she could have music lessons, every moment she'd chosen to be invisible so she could protect something precious. She smoothed down her mother's black dress, lifted her chin and stepped into the light. The laughter grew louder as she walked across the stage. Someone in the back yelled something she couldn't quite hear. Ashley's group in the front row cheered even louder, their fake enthusiasm reaching absurd levels. Phones were everywhere, recording, waiting for her to stumble or freeze or run away. Rebecca walked to the piano bench and sat down with deliberate grace. She adjusted the bench height, taking her time, refusing to be rushed by their mockery. The audience was getting louder, the energy building toward something that felt like it might explode. She placed her hands on the keys. The cool ivory felt familiar under her fingertips, like coming home. She closed her eyes for just a moment, blocking out the crowd, blocking out the laughter, blocking out everything except the music that lived inside her. Then Rebecca opened her eyes, took one final breath, and began to play. The first note cut through the noise like a knife through silk. It was a single, clear sound that seemed impossible to ignore. Then came the second note and the third, building into something that made the laughter in the auditorium falter and stumble. By the time Rebecca's hands moved into the opening passage, the mockery had started to die in people's throats. She was playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most technically demanding and emotionally powerful pieces ever written. Her fingers moved across the keys with a speed and precision that seemed almost impossible. The notes cascaded like water, sometimes gentle as rain, sometimes crashing like ocean waves against rocks. In the front row, Ashley's smile began to freeze on her face. She'd expected maybe a simple song, something basic that a high school student might stumble through. This was something else entirely. This was real. This was professional. This was nothing like what she'd planned for. The auditorium was changing. The jeering voices stopped. The exaggerated cheering from Ashley's group faded into shocked silence. Students who had been holding up their phones to catch Rebecca's failure found themselves lowering them slightly, actually watching instead of just recording. Some forgot to record at all. Rebecca's hands flew across the keys, her entire body moving with the music. She swayed slightly, leaning into the dramatic passages, pulling back during the softer moments. Every note was perfect, but more than that, every note meant something. This wasn't just technical skill. This was someone pouring their entire soul into sound. The music swelled and filled every corner of the auditorium. It reached into the back rows where students had come expecting a joke. It touched the teachers who stood along the walls, many of whom were now staring with open mouths. It wrapped around Ashley and her friends like a blanket they couldn't shake off. Tyler's hand, holding his phone to live stream, began to shake slightly. The comments on his stream had changed completely. Instead of laughing emojis and cruel jokes, people were asking who this girl was, where she'd learned to play, if this was real or some kind of trick. Kevin, sitting next to Ashley, leaned over and whispered, "Did you know she could actually play?" Ashley didn't answer. She couldn't. Her carefully constructed plan was crumbling with every passing second. The fake support signs in her lap suddenly felt heavy and wrong. The glittery fan club shirt she wore felt like it was burning her skin. Rebecca moved into a particularly difficult section, her fingers dancing across multiple octaves in rapid succession. The technical difficulty was obvious even to people who knew nothing about music. This wasn't something you learned from a few casual lessons. This was years of dedicated practice. This was talent that couldn't be faked. In the middle of the auditorium, Rebecca's father sat with tears streaming down his face. He recognized the piece immediately. It was the same music his wife had been practicing the week before she died. The same piece she'd promised to perform but never got the chance to. Now here was his daughter, playing it like she'd channeled her mother's spirit directly through her fingertips. Mr. Williams, standing in the wings, pulled out his phone and quickly texted the district's fine arts coordinator. "You need to see this," he typed. "We have a real prodigy here." The music shifted into a gentler passage and Rebecca's playing became soft and delicate. She barely seemed to touch the keys, yet the sound that emerged was crystal clear. It was beautiful in a way that made hearts ache. Several students found themselves getting emotional without understanding why. The music was reaching something deep inside them, something they didn't know could be touched. Mrs. Patterson, the librarian, stood near the back with her hand over her mouth. She'd known Rebecca was special, had sensed something in that quiet girl who hid among the books, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. Brittany, sitting in the front row next to Ashley, felt something break inside her chest. She'd spent the last 2 weeks being cruel to someone who had more talent in one finger than Brittany had in her entire body. The shame hit her like a physical blow. She glanced at Ashley, wanting to say something, but Ashley's face was like stone. The music built again, climbing toward the first major climax of the piece. Rebecca's arms moved in wide arcs, her whole upper body engaged in creating the sound. The piano responded to her like it was alive, like it had been waiting its entire existence for someone who could play it like this. Students who had come to laugh were now leaning forward in their seats. The auditorium had gone from chaotic mockery to absolute silence, except for the music. Even the rustling of clothes stopped. Even breathing seemed to quiet. Everyone was caught in the spell Rebecca was weaving. The piece demanded everything from her, and she gave it willingly. When the music called for power, she delivered thunder. When it called for gentleness, she gave whispers. When it called for speed, her fingers blurred across the keys so fast they seemed to multiply. She hit a particularly challenging run, a cascade of notes that spiraled down the keyboard like falling stars. Her hands crossed and uncrossed, her fingers never missing a single note. It was the kind of passage that would make a professional pianist nervous. Rebecca played it like she was breathing. In the front row, Ashley felt something she'd never felt before. It wasn't just embarrassment, though that was part of it. It wasn't just regret, though that was growing by the second. It was the sudden, crushing realization that she'd completely misunderstood everything. She'd thought Rebecca was weak because she was quiet. She'd thought she was nobody because she was invisible. She'd never considered that maybe Rebecca had chosen to be invisible while she built something extraordinary in the shadows. The USB drive with the cruel audio files sat in the tech booth. Forgotten, Danny, who was supposed to play them at Ashley's signal, couldn't bring himself to even think about it. He stood with his hand frozen away from the controls, mesmerized like everyone else. Rebecca moved into the slower, more emotional middle section of the piece. This was where the music became less about technical skill and more about feeling. Her playing became intimate, like she was sharing secrets, like she was telling a story without words. Some students found tears running down their faces without realizing when they'd started crying. The music was reaching into memories they'd forgotten, feelings they'd buried. It was pulling at something universal and human that connected them all. A freshman girl who had laughed at the memes earlier now sat with her hand over her heart, feeling ashamed and moved at the same time. A senior boy who'd made a cruel joke in the hallway that morning found himself wishing he could take it back. Throughout the auditorium, the same transformation was happening. Mockery was turning into awe. Cruelty was being replaced by respect. The teachers were having their own revelations. How had they not known? How had this level of talent been sitting in their classrooms for 3 years without anyone noticing? What did it say about them that they'd let this girl slip through the cracks, invisible and unrecognized? Rebecca's playing grew more intense as the piece built toward its finale. The music demanded more speed, more power, more emotion. She gave it everything. Her arms ached. Her fingers were starting to tire, but she didn't slow down. She couldn't. The music had taken over, and she was just the vessel it poured through. The climax was approaching, the moment where everything the piece had been building toward would explode into a cascade of sound. Rebecca prepared for it, gathering her remaining strength. Her hands positioned themselves for the final, most difficult section. Then something unexpected happened. A single person stood up in the middle of the auditorium. Then another. Then 3 more. Students were rising to their feet while she was still playing, unable to wait for the end to show their appreciation. They didn't applaud yet, didn't make a sound. They just stood, offering the only tribute they could think of while the music still flowed. More students rose. Then more. Within seconds, half the auditorium was standing. Teachers stood. Parents stood. Even Ashley's friends started to rise one by one until Brittany tugged at Ashley's sleeve. Ashley stood too, mechanically, her face pale. Rebecca saw none of this. Her eyes were closed now, lost completely in the music. She was in that place beyond thought, beyond consciousness, where only the music existed. Her grandmother was with her there. Her mother was with her. All the women who had come before her, all their strength and talent and determination flowing through her hands. The final passage arrived. The notes came faster than seemed humanly possible. Rebecca's fingers were a blur. The piano sang and roared and whispered and shouted. Every emotion a human could feel was somehow contained in those sounds. Joy and sorrow, anger and peace, loss and hope. Everything mixed together into something transcendent. The entire auditorium was standing now. Every single person on their feet, watching this girl in a simple black dress pull miracles from a piano. Phones were still recording, but the comments streaming across Tyler's live stream had completely changed. People were asking if this was a professional musician pretending to be a student. They were demanding to know her name. They were sharing the stream, and the viewer count was climbing into the thousands. Rebecca's hands lifted for the final chord. She brought them down with all the power she had. The sound filled the auditorium, rich and full and absolutely perfect. It rang out, sustaining, slowly fading like the last light of sunset. Then silence. Perfect. Complete silence. Rebecca's hands remained on the keys, the final chord still echoing in the air. She was breathing hard, exhausted, her arms trembling from the effort. Slowly she lifted her hands. Slowly she opened her eyes. And then she saw them. Every person in the auditorium standing, every face turned toward her. And in that moment, before the applause began, in that perfect silence, Rebecca Chen was finally, truly seen. The applause started like thunder. It began with one person clapping, then 2. Then suddenly the entire auditorium erupted in sound so loud it seemed to shake the walls. Students were cheering, screaming, clapping until their hands hurt. Teachers were wiping tears from their eyes while they applauded. Parents who had come to watch their own children perform were on their feet for someone else's daughter. Rebecca stood slowly, her legs shaky beneath her. She looked out at the sea of standing people, at the faces that had been mocking her just minutes ago now filled with genuine awe. It was overwhelming, disorienting. She'd spent 3 years being invisible, and now everyone was looking at her like she'd hung the moon. She gave a small bow, the way her mother had taught her years ago. Simple and dignified. The applause somehow grew even louder. Some students were recording, but now they were recording something beautiful instead of something cruel. Tyler's live stream had over 5,000 viewers now, the comments scrolling so fast they were impossible to read. But Rebecca could see a few. "This is incredible. Who is she?" "I'm crying." "She's amazing." Mr. Williams rushed onto the stage, his eyes bright with excitement. He hugged Rebecca, not caring about professionalism in that moment. "That was extraordinary," he said into her ear, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely extraordinary." Rebecca walked off stage in a daze. The applause followed her into the wings, continuing long after she'd disappeared from view. Backstage, the other performers were staring at her with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Chris, the guitar player, just shook his head slowly. "How do we follow that?" he asked, half joking, half serious. The rest of the talent show continued, but nothing could match what had just happened. Every performance afterward felt smaller somehow, less significant. It wasn't fair to the other students who'd worked hard and performed well, but it was the truth. Rebecca had created a moment that would be talked about for years. She found a corner backstage and sat down, her whole body trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. Her fingers ached. Her arms felt like jelly. But inside her chest something was glowing warm and bright. She'd done it. She'd really done it. Her father found her after the show ended. He didn't say anything, just pulled her into a tight hug. She felt his tears on her shoulder, and her own tears started flowing too. They stood there holding each other while people streamed past, many of them turning to look at Rebecca with new eyes. Mrs. Patterson appeared with a bottle of water. "You need to hydrate," she said gently, and there was such pride in her voice it made Rebecca's heart squeeze. The librarian had always been kind to her, but now that kindness felt like validation. Like all those hours hiding in the library had been seen and understood by at least one person. Outside the auditorium, the hallways were packed with people talking. Rebecca's name was on everyone's lips. Students who had never spoken to her before were trying to find her, wanting to congratulate her. The memes that had been cruel jokes hours ago were being deleted, replaced with genuine praise. But Ashley wasn't deleting anything. She stood in the hallway with Brittany and Kevin, her phone in her hand, staring at the screen without really seeing it. The weight of what she'd tried to do was crushing her. All those posters, all those memes, all that careful planning to humiliate someone who had just proven herself to be remarkable. "We messed up," Brittany said quietly. "We really, really messed up." Kevin nodded, looking sick. "Everyone's going to know. All those posts we made, all those comments. Everyone's going to see what we tried to do to her." Ashley finally spoke, her voice hollow. "They already see." And they did. The internet has a long memory, and screenshots live forever. People were already digging through social media, finding Ashley's mocking posts, the cruel hashtags, the fake support campaign. The story was taking shape. Mean girl tries to humiliate quiet student. Plan backfires spectacularly when quiet student turns out to be a genius. By the next morning, the video of Rebecca's performance had gone viral. Not just school viral, but real viral. Hundreds of thousands of views, then millions. News outlets were picking it up. Music blogs were analyzing her technique. Professional pianists were commenting, saying she had conservatory-level skills. Someone identified the piece and explained how difficult it was, which made the performance even more impressive to people who didn't know classical music. Rebecca woke up to a phone filled with notifications, messages from people she'd never met, friend requests from students who'd ignored her for 3 years, emails from music schools, an agent wanting to represent her, a local news station requesting an interview. She turned off her phone and sat at her old piano instead, playing scales like she did every morning. The viral video, the attention, the sudden fame, it felt surreal and distant. But this piano, these keys, this morning ritual, this was real. Her father made breakfast and they ate together in comfortable silence. Finally, he spoke. "Everything's going to change now. You know that, right?" Rebecca nodded. "I know. You don't have to say yes to everything. You don't have to perform if you don't want to. You don't owe anyone anything." "I know that too," she said. Then, quieter. "But I think I want to. Perform, I mean. Not for them. For me. For Mom." Her father reached across the table and squeezed her hand. At school on Monday, Rebecca walked through the doors to a completely different world. Students parted to let her pass, some smiling shyly, some calling out congratulations. The hallways felt wider somehow, brighter. She wasn't invisible anymore, and surprisingly, it didn't feel as terrifying as she'd expected. The posters were gone. All of them. Someone, she suspected Mrs. Patterson, had taken them down over the weekend. But the memory of them remained, and so did the screenshots circulating online. Ashley was already facing consequences. The principal had called her in along with her parents. The school was investigating the planned audio sabotage. Danny had confessed everything, feeling guilty for his part in it. The USB drive with the cruel recordings had been turned over as evidence of bullying. But the real punishment was coming from her peers. Students who had followed Ashley blindly before were now keeping their distance. The social power she'd wielded was evaporating. People were calling her out online, sharing the screenshots of her cruel posts next to the video of Rebecca's beautiful performance. The contrast was damning. Rebecca saw Ashley in the hallway that first day back. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Ashley looked smaller somehow, diminished. Rebecca could have looked away, could have walked past without acknowledgement. Instead, she did something unexpected. She stopped. Ashley froze, uncertain and afraid. Was this the moment Rebecca would have her revenge? Would she say something cutting? Something that would destroy Ashley the way Ashley had tried to destroy her? Why? Rebecca asked simply. Not angry, just genuinely curious. Why did you do all that? Ashley opened her mouth, closed it again. What could she say? That she'd been bored? That she'd wanted to feel powerful? That she'd seen someone vulnerable and decided to make them more vulnerable because she could? All of those reasons sounded hollow and cruel in the light of day. I don't know, Ashley finally whispered. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. Rebecca studied her for a moment. She could see that Ashley meant it, that the regret was real. But apologies don't erase harm, and feeling bad doesn't undo cruelty. I spent 3 years being invisible, Rebecca said quietly. I chose that. I chose to be quiet and small because the world felt safer that way. You saw that quietness and thought it meant I was weak, that I was easy to break. She paused. But you were wrong. Being quiet doesn't mean being weak. And being invisible doesn't mean being nothing. Ashley's eyes filled with tears.
I know that now. I hope you do, Rebecca said.
Because everyone's carrying something. Everyone's fighting battles you can't see. And you never know who you're hurting when you decide to be cruel just because you can. She walked away then, leaving Ashley standing in the hallway with tears running down her face. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly. But it wasn't revenge either. It was something more complicated and more honest. The months that followed brought changes Rebecca had never imagined. She was offered a full scholarship to a prestigious music conservatory. Her story was featured in magazines and online publications, often framed as an inspirational tale about hidden talent and perseverance. The viral video reached tens of millions of views, but Rebecca stayed grounded. She still ate lunch in the library sometimes, though now other students often joined her. She still wore thrift store clothes because expensive ones felt uncomfortable and wrong. She still practiced every day on her old upright piano, though she now also had access to the school's grand piano whenever she wanted it. She gave more performances. A concert at the local theater, a spot in a regional competition where she placed first, an invitation to play at a music festival. Each time she felt her mother's presence, her grandmother's strength, her father's quiet pride. Ashley faded from the spotlight she'd once commanded. She'd learned a hard lesson about the permanence of cruelty in the digital age. But she'd also learned something more important: that people aren't props in your story, that actions have consequences, and that power used cruelly is power lost. 2 years later, at graduation, Rebecca gave a speech. She talked about being invisible, about finding strength in silence, about the music that saved her. She talked about cruelty and forgiveness and the complicated space between them. She didn't mention Ashley by name, but everyone knew. "Some of you knew me before that night at the talent show," Rebecca said from the podium. "Most of you didn't. I was easy to miss, easy to overlook. And I learned that being invisible can be both a shield and a cage. You're safe, but you're also alone. And eventually, if you want to really live, you have to step into the light." She looked out at her classmates, at the faces that had once mocked her and then celebrated her. "But here's what I want you to remember. Everyone in this room has something inside them that deserves to be seen. Everyone has a gift, a passion, a story worth telling. Your job isn't to tear down other people's gifts. It's to find your own and share it bravely, and maybe, if we're lucky, to help others find theirs too." The applause that followed was genuine and warm, not the thunderous ovation of the talent show, but something quieter and more meaningful. After the ceremony, Rebecca's father drove her home one last time before she left for the conservatory. They passed the school, the auditorium where everything changed, the library where she'd hidden for so long. As they drove, Rebecca thought about that night, about walking onto that stage, about the music that had saved her. She'd spent 3 years being invisible, building something beautiful in the shadows. And then for 12 minutes, she'd let the world see her, really see her. And nothing had been the same since. Being seen was terrifying. But it was also freedom, and Rebecca Chen, the girl who'd once hidden in library corners, was finally ready to be free.